All right, let's talk about man-made horrors beyond human comprehension. Breaking: Biden lifts ban on Ukraine using U.S. missiles to strike inside of Russia.
It's being reported this evening that President Biden has lifted restrictions on Ukraine using U.S. weapons to strike deeper inside Russia. President Zelenskyy has been pushing Western allies to allow his forces to use the missiles. It's believed the decision could help shift momentum in the conflict. Sky Security and Defence Editor Deborah Haynes joins me now from Rio de Janeiro, where the G20 summit is due to start tomorrow.
I'll do a fun react
and this
to
news
today.
will come as a huge relief to President Zelenskyy, who has been calling for it for many weeks.
It will, and Joe Biden is actually going to be coming here to Rio de Janeiro, where he will be meeting alongside other world leaders like China's president. He met him yesterday, actually, at a different...
Yeah, so this is the thread. Biden has authorized Ukraine to use powerful ATAMCs, long-range weapons for limited strikes inside of Russia in response to North Korea's deployment of thousands of troops to aid Moscow's war effort, two senior U.S. officials tell the Post. The easing of restrictions on allowing Kyiv to use ATACMs to hit target inside of Russia is a significant reversal in U.S. policy and comes as some 10,000 elite North Korean troops have been sent to Kursk to help Moscow retake territory gained by Ukraine. The Biden administration fears that more North Korean Special Forces units could follow up in support of this effort. ATACMs. It's such a funny word in general. ATACMs. It sounds like a treat. The move precedes by 2 months the return of Trump, who has signaled he intends to fight a diplomatic off-ramp to the war. Biden provides Ukraine's use of long-range U.S. weapons inside of Russia, reversing policy. I wonder why Biden gave his approval now. Ukraine's Zelenskyy says he wants to end war with Russia through diplomacy next year. But also, Zelenskyy has said, wasn't there like a podcast going around of Zelenskyy sitting on a radio show being like, F you, America, we will never sit at the table. You can't force us to do anything or some shit. Now, I think that's probably him just posturing in an effort not to get like assassinated. Or maybe it's an older video. The principle still remains as far as Zelenskyy being like, oh yeah, nobody can tell us to do anything. Which Elon Musk replied with, he's such a funny comedian. His sense of humor is amazing.
Вона повинна бути сильною для
Firstly, strong Ukraine.
сильна Україна. Вона повинна бути
It has to be strong for any diplomacy. I want to emphasize again.
Хочу ще раз це підкреслити.
Але США не лише
But the USA is not only a potential mediator in the negotiations. This is a country that provides huge amounts of assistance to Ukraine, which can encourage us to sit down at the negotiating table. What message did you get from Donald Trump during this contact that you had with him? I mean, as he says, I will become president and sit down at the negotiating table. What does it look like? Thanks for reading for us, bro. Couldn't do this without you. I mean, yeah, there are people who listen and don't watch. At the negotiating table, what does it look like? No, I think he does not say that.
Ми незалежна Україна.
We are an independent Ukraine, and it seems to me that during this war,
в час цієї війни наш народ і я особисто
our people, and I personally, in negotiations with the United States and with Trump, Biden,
зі Сполученими Штатами Америки, і з Трампом, і з Байденом, і з іншими
and for
європейськими
other European
лідерами
leaders have proven that
довели, що ми
with us, the rhetoric of sit and listen is not working.
Що з нами риторика «сідай і слухай» не працюючи. І це не
And this is not because we are like that, but because this is how we should treat any country.
Ми такі, а через те, що так ми повинні відноситись в принципі до будь-якої країни, будь-якого народу.
Any people, any leader to respect. This is equality.
Це, в принципі, рівність, одна з цих цінностей,
One of those values that we are fighting for today. I mean, he doesn't say anything like that bad. The U.S. cannot force us to sit and listen at the negotiating table. We're an independent country, says Ukraine President Zelenskyy in Ukraine radio interview. But I think that the way that the Visegrad boys posted this is not exactly the way that he's talking about it. Like the way he phrases it is not that aggressive at all. It's almost not what he said at all. And yet it seems like nobody fucking looked at what he said and just kind of went off on what the Visegrad sourcing looked like, which is always going to be bad. It's fucking Visegrad. They're dumbasses. I thought Visegrad people are pro-Ukraine. I don't want to even get into what Visegrad people are, but they are a propaganda rag in general. Yeah, his sense of humor is amazing, says Elon Musk. He didn't even fix it. He said he sense of humor. And then he posted a link to the BBC News, Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the comedian president who's rising to the moment. I've said already that I don't think Donald Trump is going to, at least with his cabinet picks, he hasn't really shown that he's genuinely interested in like ending this war whatsoever, or at least like trying to find a diplomatic off-ramp. I don't think that he is even remotely interested in that whatsoever, usually because America's interests in Ukraine are not born out of, as I've repeated time and time again, a genuine emancipatory goal. America has found itself on the right side of this dynamic, a sovereign nation having its sovereignty violated by a neighboring state that is waging war on this sovereign nation. So yes, Ukraine does have a right to defend itself. America's interests in Ukraine, however, are the, in my opinion, extension and continuation of this war. Zero evidence. I have seen no video of Koreans in Kursk, and everything is filmed in this war. It's propaganda. I have seen it. What the I definitely have seen it, and I'm pretty sure that's not wrong. I think that there are Koreans stationed, like North Koreans stationed in Russia to a certain degree. What I think, current administration has evidence that the next one will severely support. Ukraine doesn't want that, but Russia would welcome this aggression because it's going to justify more occupation. I don't think either side is as thirsty as it seems to continue this. Okay. Ukraine has the right to not be threatened on their border. This is like the flip of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we are the USSR this time. No. While I understand the Western world's ambitions in Ukraine, its political ambitions in Ukraine, wanting to bring this bordering nation into the sphere of Western influence, and how that could come across as frustrating to Russia, I have always maintained the position that Vladimir Putin's actions of invading Ukraine was the dumbest thing that he could have possibly done in this situation, regardless of like the additional territory that he's been able to violently seize in this process. It's still an unimaginably dumb thing to do. And it was, and it still is. You have killed tens of thousands of people. You have displaced millions of people. You have mined entire areas. It's just so stupid. And in the process, you have greatly escalated the defense capabilities of Western nations. You've destroyed critical infrastructure in Ukraine. You've permanently damaged Ukraine, made it a more unstable nation than it already was. And while you're doing that, you have, killed a shit ton of your own people as well. And you have legitimized the NATO admirals and their positions at a time when you could have gone the Chinese route. You could have 100% pursued the Chinese route of just doing energy contracts. That's why I always laugh when people who are pro-Russia will always say like, oh, what about LPR and DPR's independence? And it's like, dude, they've destroyed LPR and DPR. The do you mean? Like, if you're talking about the 13,000 people that were killed through routine bombing campaigns that the Ukrainian state and its National Guard were engaging in a tit-for-tat battle with people in the region. Some were Russian proxies as well. Yeah, guess what, dude? The solution to that is not to kill more people, because that's what the Vladimir Putin solution has been. And I feel like that is not an adequate solution. That is a bad solution to the problem. You just worsen the problem. So I don't think that that is a valid excuse. I don't think that there are valid excuses to invade a sovereign nation like this, regardless. There was definitely a lot of soft power capabilities that Russia had, and there was a shit ton more economic avenues that they could have pursued, especially when they were like still developing, Nord Stream 2. It's just very, very stupid. What should Russia have done to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO? The process of joining NATO is one that is supposed to be democratic, regardless of how much clout America has in this situation. And not only did Russia already maintain Crimea, which made it impossible for Ukraine to actually join NATO, there was no interest. And America itself has also routinely said that Ukraine will never join NATO. Like they hold that as a fucking carrot, but it's just, it's marketing. I don't think that Russia's concerns about Ukraine joining NATO were valid. The US also said they don't plan to move eastwards with NATO, but they still did. Yes. I mean, look, the NATOization of Finland happened. North Sea 2 was bombed in the process. This has not been as a banger of a fucking campaign for Russia as the way certain people claim it has been. I don't think that even the biggest Ukraine defenders at this point are saying that it's been successful for Ukraine. I think everybody understands the situation is dire. But ultimately, I think Russia's actions basically propped up NATO in a very big way. Now, the question is, will taking away target restrictions and allowing Ukraine to use American weapons to strike directly inside of Russian soil and Russian territory, will that actually give Ukraine a upper hand in this battle? And if that's the case, why didn't they do it earlier? I don't think so. I think all it does is simply continue. It just simply continues the conflict in a time when it's just like the Kirk's offensive did not actually stop Russia from moving further into Ukraine. If anything, repositioning certain battalions to go into Russian territory literally ended up giving Russia the opportunity to take over more space and push further into Ukraine. I don't know what will happen. Biden admin wants Russia to know what the purpose of a missile escalation is: offensive to help Ukraine hold and take Russian territory. Putin has already said this means U.S. NATO directly at war with Russia, since U.S. NATO personnel can operate these missile systems. Biden allows Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range U.S. missiles. With 2 months left in office, the president for the first time authorized Ukrainian military to use a system known as ATACMS to help defend its force in the Kursk region of Russia. A major escalation, Putin said, that Western approval for such a step would mean the direct involvement of NATO countries, the United States, and European countries in the war in Ukraine, because NATO military infrastructure and personnel would have to be involved. If there's an inevitability to this conflict ending due to things that are outside of the power of like the United States of America and every other country involved, because the best kinds of weapons are not going to make up for a shortage of manpower. If that's the case, and this is going to inevitably end, why the would you not try to pack it up when you're still in power? Because this, seen as an escalation, is going to make it seem like when the inevitable end of this conflict comes, it will be in the hands of the Trump administration. I said the similar thing with respect to Israel and Gaza as well, and Lebanon too. I don't know why the Democrats do anything at this point. I do not know if this will end up changing the trajectory of this battle. I don't feel like it will, but what do I know? Maybe they know more. I mean, I'm sure they know more than I do. Having said that, however, there was one area where I was right. Ukraine had far more leverage in the Antalya 15-point plan that was discussed in the beginning, a couple months in. And at the time, I said that this would be a great deal to put together on the table, and everyone yelled at me and said, "That's appeasement. You are Neville Chamberlain. You are you want Putler to win. You want Putler to win." And lo and behold, there is far more territory that Russia has acquired in the process, and far more people that have died in the process. I feel like that would have been a better time to do this, because I repeated this back then, and I will repeat it again. All conflict ends with treaties. I think that if Russia's unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine is going to end, it is only going to happen not because like America genuinely wants this conflict to end, because they're morally appalled by it. It only ends because they feel like the defense industry can offload their older weapons or even newer weapons elsewhere, and they realize that it's far too costly and that the war can't continue because there's not enough manpower remaining in Ukraine to use the weapons.
On the sidelines of a different summit in Peru, Vladimir Putin normally comes to the G20. Russia, of course, a member, but he is facing arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court, and so is not going to be here. He said previously that his presence would be a distraction, but you can be sure that Russia's war in Ukraine will be talked about on the sidelines of the summit, and as well as...
I don't believe you're lying in any way, and I believe you're very pro-Ukrainian, but I honestly have not seen a single video of Koreans in Kursk or in combat, and literally everything is on video. Yeah, I've only seen them like moving around. I've never seen them in combat, but then again, I don't know how you would see them in combat, how you can identify them as Korean. But the only places that I've seen like a bunch of... I mean, Russia's a big country. There's hella Asian people inside of Russia too, so, you know, maybe they're just Asians from Russia and they're being presented as like Ukrainians, but that seems kind of silly.
Inside the centre, and for Joe Biden to make this decision now after months of deliberating over whether or not he was going to allow the Ukrainians to use these long-range army tactical missile systems. They are ballistic missiles launched from ground-based systems against targets inside Russia, something that the Americans seem to have been hesitant to allow, concerned that it might then prompt an escalatory response by Russia. But according to reports in the New York Times, the sudden decision by the North Koreans to join Russian forces on the battlefield at the moment inside Russia, fighting against Ukrainian troops that have seized parts of the Kursk region, that is the trigger for this decision by the United States. And now all eyes surely are going to be on other allies of Ukraine, the UK, for example, which has for a long time also been asked by the Ukrainians to allow its forces to use their Storm Shadow cruise missiles against targets inside Russia. The British have been more forward-leaning, more seemingly willing to allow the Ukrainians to use these weapons, but had been waiting for a decision by the United States. Now that seems to have come. All eyes, of course, are going to be on what Keir Starmer, who's going to be here as well in Rio, will say, and whether he will confirm that British missiles can also be used by the Ukrainians.